Folks, we've given you plenty of examples of why the UN is no good for Canada, or any other democracy for that matter. Here's one more. Here's how they've been handling Iran. Rather, have not been handling Iran. Instead of demanding that they either put a stop to their nuclear program or reveal what they plan to do with it, 193 countries at the United Nations voted to elect Iran to the top post on the UN Arms Trade Treaty Conference. Iran, Arms Trade Treaty Conference. This after they were discovered to have been making illegal arms shipments to Syria, which is vying to be, by the way, Syria, on the UN Human Rights Council. Two regimes where democracy is nothing more than a nuisance. In short, 193 countries trust Iran to manage the global flow of weapons. Can you believe that? Do they think a plum UN appointment will be enough incentive for them to start playing nice? Look, many of you have written to me wondering why Canada is still part of this organization. And frankly, I don't know. Millions of your tax dollars every year spent on UN membership. And what do we get in return? We lose our bid for a seat on the UN Security Council. Iran wins a seat at the UN Arms Conference. One thing is certain, we cannot trust the UN to stop the terror from Tehran. For more, let's go to Clifford May. He's with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, coming to us from Washington. Clifford, are the inmates ruling the asylum?
Yes, but it's not a joke anymore. That's not hyperbolic anymore. What's happened is, for a time, the UN was an international organization that didn't discriminate between the democracies on the one hand and the dictatorships on the other. It didn't want to be judgmental. But it's gone way beyond that. And at this point, the dictatorships, the unfree societies, do run the institution. And they do so in a very specific way. On the Security Council, of course, you have Russia and China. They have vetoes. And in the General Assembly, that's run by what's called the non-aligned movement, and most particularly by an organization, the most powerful organization in the world most people have never heard of, now called the Conference of Islamic Cooperation, based in Saudi Arabia, more than 50 members, mostly Muslim majority, some not actually. And with the aligned movement, as non-aligned movement as well, they decide everything for the General Assembly. So the organization has absolutely been taken over by non-democratic and anti-democratic governments, and they use the money from Canada and the United States and Europe in order to fund this organization that works against all of our interests.
Clifford May, we happen to be on the chain of a very intriguing email where the question was asked of a top official at the United Nations, how could Iran be on this particular arms committee? And let me just read you his response. This is standard practice. Usually no one objects to the candidates proposed by the regional groups like the one you just talked about. This is a sort of, and here's the word, gentleman. This is a sort of gentleman's understanding that is observed in such global meetings. How do you feel, Clifford May, about this so-called gentleman's agreement not to question whether or not the person and the country wanting to be on a committee is illegally shipping arms to Syria and illegally participating in genocide?
Because the UN takes no position on any of those issues, not seriously. The UN overlooked genocide and in some cases did things to encourage it in places like Rwanda, Darfur, the Balkans. The UN, at this point in history, does not take positions on these kinds of issues. It is entirely neutral about such things. And it is run by the worst dictators and worst dictatorships in the world. They have most of the clout. And they know they can do any of these things, no matter how outrageous it may seem to me or you or your audience, and there will be absolutely no consequences whatsoever. We will rail about it. There may be some of our diplomats will say that they're shocked and they're outraged and they don't like it. The money will continue to flow. The diplomats will continue to go to the United Nations, and the orders will be given, again, from places like Tehran and places like Saudi Arabia and other non-democratic countries. This is what has happened to the UN, and nothing is being done about it.
Okay, but this emperor has no clothes. This place has no cred. These gentlemen are not gentlemen. So here's the question. What's in it? You know, we ask what's in it for Canada, and our viewers think that it's ridiculous for us to even be part of this, and not to mention part of it, but to pay excessive amounts, billions of dollars over the years. The United States has spent far more than we have. The United States is a bigger country. Doesn't anyone in the United States with any clout ask the question, what's in it for us to be part of this fraud?
Not many people with clout do ask that. The United States pays about a quarter of the UN expenses in almost every form that it's in, including the major ones and many of the minor ones. And yet you don't find that question really being asked among politicians. But I would say that in the short run, we should consider the following. Let's not let it get worse. And by not getting worse, I mean we should not go along with those, including quite a few people in Europe, who see the UN as a global government, want it to have taxing power, want it to have the power to make laws for all of us, want a new law of the sea treaty that will give billions and billions of dollars to the UN to give or to a UN agency that will give it away as it chooses. We'll have no say in it. That should not happen. We should go back to the idea that the UN is perhaps a place for a dialogue and debate, a debating society, if you will. We should put it on a budget, put it on a diet, do that immediately, and defund the agencies that essentially are spitting in our eyes. Until we do that, we're not moving in the right direction. We're moving very quickly in the wrong direction.
Well, you know, Clifford, many years ago, when people talked about global government and the conspiracy to have global government, people talking that way were thought of as nuts, you know, people wearing tinfoil hats, and all of those pejoratives were used against them. Now you've got the UN, as you just alluded to, openly wanting to impose global taxes and wanting to impose global rules and not giving a rip about national sovereignty. You don't have to wear tinfoil to notice it.
It's not tinfoil. If you've got a transnational organization, I think that's the proper term of art, that is making laws and imposing taxes, it is a government. It is a global government. And you have a movement. It's actually an ideological movement with a lot of adherents in Europe, in the United States, and I'm sure in Canada too, called transnational progressivism. And they want this to happen. They want to see more global governance. They want something even larger than the EU, and that's what they're pushing for, and they are doing so very successfully.
Clifford, at that point, I've got to put the stop sign up, but we'll continue this important conversation down the road. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Clifford May in Washington.